Good afternoon, everybody. And, well, the clock is ticking. 69 minutes and 55 seconds. Welcome to this afternoon's roundtable talk that principally is going to be discussing between ourselves the various merits of film school education versus School of Life education. But before we begin, I'd like to introduce today's panellists, starting at the far end, Fabian Wagner, ASC, BSC, cinematographer of Game of Thrones, Zack Snyder's Justice League, among many others. Next, Stuart Biddlecombe, cinematographer of Doctor Who and Sherlock, and most recently Handmaid's Tale, for which he garnered an ASC Award nomination. Rachel Clark, cinematographer of the outstanding film Pirates and the Dominic Cook show I Am Maria. And Adam Singodia, recent graduate of the National Film and Television School, cinematographer of the amazing film Shoal that was presented at the BSC Short Film Awards in 2020. So, and then me, Chris Ross, BSc, president of the BSC and cinematographer. So welcome to the panel, everybody. Thanks for joining me. So I guess maybe we should start with, why don't we start with Fabs at the far end? Why don't you give us a little introduction to your journey to being a cinematographer?
Okay. Well, I'm German originally. I got turned down by a couple of film schools before another film school took me in. And now I'm here. So strange, isn't it?
All happened so quickly.
It all happened so quickly, yeah. I'm from Munich originally. I applied to the Munich Film School ages ago. I'm quite old now. And they turned me down, which I always call the luckiest break I ever got, was them turning me down. Because I always knew beforehand I actually didn't want to work in Germany. I knew that I wanted to work internationally. And so them turning me down actually really got me to take that step and move away. So I went to Denmark to the film school, to the film course there for a year. Came back to Germany after, and I was working as a trainee loader for a while, and then moved to England, to the Northern Film School. Did an exchange year with the FAMU in Prague in between, and then came back to Leeds to finish my MA in 2004. God. Yeah, that's it.
Fantastic. And Stuart, would you mind giving us a little intro to your film education?
So I went to National Film School in Beaconsfield. I applied, I think probably about 2000. I didn't get in first time. I was turned away. Tried to get in next year, and I managed to get in. Before that, I actually tried to get into another university, but again, I was also turned away from them also because I didn't do very well in my A-levels. So I've been turned down quite a lot. Hasn't changed, to be honest. And I loved it. I love the film school. I think it's a wonderful place. I'm sure there's other different ways, which I'm sure we'll learn about today. But yeah, and then from then on, graduated in 2004. Been very lucky, kind of worked my way up, worked my way through to be shooting reasonably good dramas right now.
Great. And Clarky, Rachel, would you like to tell us about your film education?
Yeah, so I'm the non-film school camp. I went to university to study photography and then studied anthropology and sociology and stuff. I was always really interested in movies, but I didn't know that was something you could do for a job. I was kind of obsessed with images, photos, and representation and different cultures, but film was just something I didn't even know was something like I could do. And then by accident started making short films because I was going to this local cinema and they were doing stuff like that there, so I got involved with making short films. And I was like, I like cameras, I can help out. And they were like, no, you can, bring tea and help us build sets and stuff. And I was always trying to touch cameras, but they were like, no, we've got someone for that. So then I was a runner for a while, and I just managed to get a job as a runner. on a couple of feature films that were filming in the local area that I was living in. Always pestering the camera department again. No, go away. Try again later. So I just kept pestering, and then eventually got a job as a camera trainee, again on a local kind of production. And I did a lot of camera trainee jobs in the north, in the Midlands, before I moved to London. And then, I was a second AC, focus puller. I've been an operator more recently on quite a lot of things, and started shooting my own shorts kind of at the weekends, borrowing kit from features for people I'd met at work. And to have shot a couple of films now, and just wrapped on a TV show. So, yeah.
Yeah, pretty good. Adam, why don't you tell us about your film school education?
I was always into kind of arts and crafts, and then started getting really into film when I got to college. Had a super good teacher there, and then took it to university and did an undergraduate there. And straight after that, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, so I applied to NFCS on the directing course. Didn't hear anything back, and then kind of after that, I ended up just doing a work experience, like assisting. Found a full-time job for a couple of years, and then went freelance. And then after that, I kind of realised it was cinematography that was what I wanted to do solely. So I ended up applying to NFTS again and in the cinematography course. And like studio, I also didn't get in with that, so I applied again and finally got in. And it was the last time I was ever going to apply because I had to kind of continue with my life otherwise. I managed to get in on that, like lucky time. And kind of graduated just as COVID happened. So it's kind of great that I managed to finish the education before the pandemic, but also came into the workplace and there's nothing going. I just stuck at it, did a bunch of freebies, then started to get more commercials and music videos after that. Just been kind of going with the momentum and just wrapped up on my first feature. So yeah.
Fantastic. And then I used to scan barcodes at the shipping and receiving department of Panavision, and then a couple of years of doing that was fun. They let me hold a screwdriver, and then I took a few cameras apart and lenses, etc., and used to beg, borrow, and steal cameras at weekends. Shot some shorts, occasional music video, etc. And then ended up here, just like me and Fabs, same sort of thing. So this is where it gets stressful for you guys. So what I try to assemble with this incredible team of panellists is a spectrum of experience and career level. And you guys should be formulating questions for them over the coming few minutes. So start processing, and then we'll start pointing fingers out to the audience. So anything you can think of that might be of interest to inform the rest of the audience, that would be really great. So very loosely, I haven't planned this conversation because I'd like it to be spontaneous. But my take on cinematography education is that each of us are continuous learners, and each of us has a spark of curiosity that needs to be kept alive, whether you're a working cinematographer or a cinematography student, etc. And I just wanted that to maybe trigger the start of a conversation. What led you to cinematography in the first place, and what propelled you to either make the step to apply to film school or to start shooting shorts? And were you all shooting things outside of the framework of a career in cinematography? Stuart, I'm going to pick on you.
Thanks so much. Thanks. I always wanted to shoot, and I was very lucky in that my dad used to take stills, and so I kind of had the fundamental interest. And then I remember watching films, going to the cinema and thinking, okay, this is something I wanted to do. I didn't have any idea about how to get into the industry. I didn't know anyone in the industry. I had no kind of contacts. But at the time I was at school, and I thought, if I can learn, maths, if I can learn art, I can somehow learn how to be a cinematographer. I didn't know that I could have worked my way up. In all honesty, I didn't know that I could become, a team member and kind of work my way up. So I mean, I think it was relatively straightforward, really. I mean, I did go into the industry at first. I became a camera assistant at LWT on the South Bank, doing multi-camera TV shows, which was exciting, which was great. But then I didn't really think that was the right thing for me, and I thought, okay, I don't want to be standing behind a ped for the next 20 years. I want a light. I want to tell stories, for want of a better kind of description. So I then applied to the NFTS. As I said, I didn't get in. I tried and tried again. But for me, it was the only way I could see the kind of the quickest and easiest, the path of least resistance, I suppose, to get in. So yeah, I mean, sometimes, do I think about, should I have, when I went there, did I know about focus pulling? I knew a little bit. I didn't know much. Did I know about how the whole system works? Probably not really. But I think you learn that. I learned how to, you learn how to communicate. I had fun with my peers. I mean, I think that's what kind of really drew me to the film school. And that's what I enjoyed, was learning from other people, learning mistakes. I mean, at the film school, I made some terrific mistakes, some appalling mistakes. But I'm glad I did it there in a relatively kind of safe environment where, people saw it, but hopefully not too many people. And then at the end of it, I had a relatively good kind of show reel, which I was able then to take to production companies or to directors. And then hopefully people liked it. I didn't really work that much after film school. I didn't really work for probably about 18 months, I'd say. I slowly you work, you do the odd music video, you do low budget commercials, but it wasn't until about 18 months before I really got a relatively, a moderately budget size show. So it takes time. I don't think there's really any kind of shortcut. I don't think, film school isn't a shortcut because you still have to create that environment, those relationships. So I don't know. I don't know the benefits or not, but for me at least, it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the sort of the framework of your peers at the NFTS. There's one thing that I've noticed about the film school structure is that there are 8 or 10 similarly minded students that are on the same journey as you, but again at different stages of their life, and provide each other with a sort of a support network for allowing failure and success in equal measure.
100%, yeah. I mean, we failed miserably on many occasions. Thankfully, not many people see it. So, and we learn from each other. That's what I got most from the film school, as well as all the other kind of post, the graduate scheme, or not scheme, but how they kind of helped you kind of find your first bit of work, or whatever. But yeah, it was the collaboration. That's what I really got out of it the most.
So, Adam, I'm going to pick on you now because you can now sort of extend that conversation into your year group. Did you find the similar camaraderie and a similar framework?
Yeah, I think everyone's there because, I mean, the kind of sweet spot in age is kind of late sort of 20s. So by that time, most people kind of figure out that that's exactly what they want to do. And at film school, you've already picked your specialty. So it's not like some schools where you kind of go to try everything. So there's DPs, editors, directors, and they're all wanting to be DPs, editors, directors. But yeah, I mean, going back to what you're saying, like the kind of reason I went is because I felt like I had a bit of a knowledge gap. Because I was never kind of focus puller or anything like that. So I felt like the other route would be film school because maybe there was something I was missing. And when I got there, I kind of figured out that it wasn't that I was missing anything, but it was more like the kind of network. And that's such an important kind of element with filmmaking is you work with your kind of peers and your friends. And that's the kind of thing that kind of builds your career, actually. Yeah.
And Fabian, how did you find your network structure being so international? So if you, with your course in Denmark and then your film school in the north of England, how did that work for you?
I mean, to be honest, for me it was, I never actually wanted to go to film school because academically I'm terrible and I was bad in school, and I love working, I love physically working. the reason why I went to film school is because my parents, I come from a middle-class family. My granddad was a judge, my auntie a lawyer, my mum was a teacher, and my dad was an artist. And for some reason, my parents were always against me going into film. My mum, because she couldn't understand it. My dad, because he was an artist and he knew how hard it can be. That's something I know now. That's not something I obviously understood when I was 16, 17, 18. So we had huge, long fights. I started working in the industry when I was about 16, and I did everything from runner to, I was in the art department. I did everything, running everything, and it was a very conscious decision because I wanted to really know what all the other departments do. Because even though I knew I wanted to shoot, I thought that if I understand those departments, that will make me a better DP, hopefully one day if I ever get there. And so film school was born out of this fight with my parents that they wanted me to study law. And there was a whole year of my life after school that I actually enrolled into law school, but only spent one day there. And quietly was working on film sets. But after a year of lying to my parents and having to call my friends and sort of make up stories of what I learned today about paragraph 20 of civil law and whatever, it became really stressful. And so I applied to film school, telling myself that if I get in, I'm going to tell my parents the truth and say this is what I want to do. And if I don't get in, I'm going to actually study law. Thankfully, I got in to the Danish film school. And I'll never forget the day I told my parents, because both their jaws literally dropped to the floor and they couldn't believe that I lied to them for a year. But it was the beginning of them finally understanding of how much I wanted this. And so for me, film school was born from that. So I always had a very different experience in film school. I absolutely agree that the meeting people of a similar passion, we all have the same passion in film school, is great. And now looking back on it, I had a very strange time at film school. I can say this now after 20 years, I think. The FAMU, is one of the most sort of regarded film schools in the world. Probably some great people came out of there. I had a terrible time. I was stoned most of the time as well, so that's my fault. But I didn't get anything out of that place, nothing. So I always think film school is very personal to everybody. It's really what you make out of it. And then I went to the Northern Film School, which back then had no structure. There was no support from the industry. There was no guest lectures. There was no connections to the film world. And so from that point of view, it was actually really bad. I had the best time because I met 3-4 people, and we were so in love with this, of what we wanted to do, and the dream of filmmaking, that we just made the most of it without any of the other stuff that you guys have at the NFTS, for example. And so so that became my sort of film school experience, which was sort of it's kind of all over the place. But now I just shot The Crown 2 years ago with Sam Donovan, who's been my best mate for 22 years now. We met at the film school in Leeds. I shot all of his short films, and 22 years later, we shoot The Crown together. And I had so much fun every day on set, because this is the guy that I, used to get stoned with. And we had these massive dreams, big dreams, and there we are standing on the set of a big show. So that was great.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think one of the things that you, I guess, don't realise when you're a fledgling filmmaker is that you are inevitably going to get older, and you are inevitably going to get more experienced, and the collaborations that you start at 25 do have a tendency of following you, whether you like it or not. And so the collaboration side of things is really significant, and at a film school you have a set of peers that are on the same journey as you, but outside of film school you have a set of peers that are not necessarily on the same journey as you, but all treading a similar road. How did you find your sort of network of support moving forward into, pushing you forward in your career, or, how doggedly determined did you have to be to take opportunities yourself?
I think I always used to hide behind the camera because I'm quite shy. And so I always had this photography camera that I used to walk around with, and filmmaking, the fact that it's so collaborative and it's not something you do on your own was quite scary to me, to have to like talk to other people and welcome other people into this thing that I was doing on my own. So I think being an assistant like helped me with that confidence, like being on set, having to do the clapperboard in front of people, that was terrifying the first time I had to do that. And then I think when I started focus pulling, just kind of like being there next to the camera, you know, talking to actors more, being more involved in the creation of like shots with the directors and stuff, all of that stuff really helped my confidence and really gave me that push I think that I needed, kind of combined with real good support from people I was working with, DPs, gaffers, focus pullers. So I think I just needed to kind of work my way up to it a little bit. And then in terms of a network, was kind of everybody I started shooting shorts with was people I'd met at work, so like runners or PAs who wanted to be directors, or a director I shot a short for. I'd been a focus puller on her previous feature, and then she was doing a short, and she's like, you know, you were always like really good, would you be interested in doing this short? So like all those relationships came from people that I knew in a completely different capacity. So I didn't have this close network from film school in a way. I had to kind of find my own network, but there were people who were working in the industry who had the similar kind of desire and passion, the same as me, but I guess we just went around it a different way. Like the first short I shot was when I was focus pulling on American Honey, and we just took the camera truck at the weekend and just like took some kids from the area and just like made it up, and that got into London Film Festival, and then kind of started from there really. So yeah.
And Adam, have you, since graduating, have you noticed that peer group continuing amongst the graduates? What's the sort of alumni support structure that you've got between your friends?
I think the interesting thing is that people from different years kind of collaborate. So I was lucky enough to work with people that graduated a couple of years before me, sorry. But I think it generally takes the directors like a few years to kind of really get things going. So the current crop of directors that were with me are all kind of in development for features. So maybe like 3-4 years from now, they might be making those films. So for the kind of the craft subjects, I think it's a good time to get as much experience as possible. So when it comes to those directors getting their features, then you're in a much better position to be hired for them. It just takes a bit longer. So I think I'm waiting now for those kind of grad directors to make the films I want to be making.
Yeah, I guess the career route of a director tends to have more peaks and troughs and be a much harder upward journey. I think so far at least 3 of the 4 panellists have mentioned the word mistakes, and I'd like us to own up to our mistakes.
I was just going to say something about mistakes. Like film school, you obviously get to make all your mistakes kind of like in private, but I didn't have that, so I had to make all my mistakes very publicly, and it was terrifying.
It's great. It's a very humbling experience. So I am Chris Ross, and I made mistakes. I'd like to start the journey by admitting to a short film that I photographed in 2002 about a Punch and Judy man whose punch becomes alive and possessed and rampages around the streets of Ramsgate. I shot it on 16mm with Fuji 250 daylight, which you could get at the time, the set of Zeiss super speeds. It's truly appalling. It's buried. No one can see it. Fabian, I'd like to hand over the mic to yourself. Please tell us your greatest mistake.
Okay, I mean, I make mistakes all the time. I mean, mistakes are part of your life, but to be honest, very early on, I've never looked at mistakes as a mistake, and I've never actually let them sort of divert me from my path. I've always looked at mistakes as actually much more of a positive thing, as in the sense that if I didn't make a mistake, I would never revisit what I'm doing, and I would never learn from that. So I've always said to myself, just embrace them, because that's when you learn. Because that's one mistake I'll never make again. I know I'll make another one instead, But then that's the process, right? And so I've never looked at it in that way. So all my bad short films, and there's loads of them, they're all out there to watch.
Stuart?
I think again, I'm still making awful mistakes. I'm in the grade now, and I look at some of my work and think, good God, what the hell was I thinking? But I guess I just become slightly better at hiding them. So every job I do, there are mistakes, and that's what I kind of agree with Fabian that it's good that you make mistakes. My worst ever short film was my graduation from the film school. It was utter garbage. So yeah, find that, have some fun, laugh.
I can't think of a specific one because I just feel like I'm constantly still learning and making them all the time. But I try not to I'm trying not to stress about them. I used to play roller derby, and they used to say, if you don't fall over, you're not trying hard enough. So I feel like it's the same with being a DP. If you're not making a mistake, then you're not pushing yourself enough. If you can't really stay in your safe box, I don't think. Otherwise, you just won't progress and you won't learn. So I think something I'm trying to get over is that fear of failure, and just to try. I test a lot of stuff, so I'll try and test a lot of things beforehand as well to try and fail before I get to work, rather do you know? But I can't think of a specific thing because it just seems like it's constant.
Yeah, no, I think a constant mistake structure is almost the life of a DP, regardless of your point in your career. And what becomes, I mean, what is very apparent is that even the greatest mistake that you've ever made, like 4 stops under exposure, or forgetting the light direction on a turnaround or whatever, all of those things can be written off as a creative choice and are much less observable to a viewing audience member than they are to yourself. So you find that you're in a constant battle with your inner demon.
I think that's very true. It's because it's us, really. Yeah. It's no one else. No one else sees those mistakes. It's just because we're all super critical of ourselves.
The person
and you're right. It is a creative. You can get away with anything by saying it's a creative choice. When I was a loader and I double exposed a magazine on 35mm, and we realized the next morning that wasn't a creative choice. That was different. That was a mistake. That was an actual mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. If you've made a mistake, you're agonising over it, but someone else, the director's probably agonising about something completely different that they missed, or an actor, and it's actually something that it's your issue, really. No one else really notices, most of the time.
Yeah. And I just want to place Adam on the couch to admit his greatest error.
The good thing is that most of my work at the moment is music videos, so they're all mistakes in a lovely way, so I can kind of get away with anything. But I think it's very important to risk things on every job if it's right for the script. So every single kind of short or commercial, I think it's great to kind of try new things and make those mistakes now, and then hopefully it informs your work later on. So
yeah, I think it's very important to sit outside your own personal safety zone, and I think everybody that is an artist and that crafts an image has their own version of what they deem to be within a wheelhouse of their work, and I think it's important to be constantly challenging that and making as many mistakes as possible. So I'd like to turn this over to the audience. Does anybody have a question so far, or should we ramble on some more about our mistakes and our dubious life choices?
I have 2 questions, actually. One is, why, in your opinion, is it that so many excellent film schools keep rejecting so many excellent cinematographers, or at least people who turn out to be later excellent cinematographers? Is this something to do with how the candidates present themselves? Is it something to do with examinations, the talent spotting, or what is it? So this is the first question. The second question is about mistakes. Would you say that it is easier now to make mistakes while everybody's shooting on digital, almost everybody? Or was it easier to make mistakes before with film, where 4 stops underexposed meant actually, a lot of money to be spent again? what is your feeling about that? Has the transfer to digital made you more careful or less careful?
Okay. Yeah. Let's address the second half of the question first. So essentially has the digital cinema revolution made life easier, made life safer? I guess. Immediately from my perspective, so I was shooting film up until about 2012, and then fairly swiftly the transition to digital cinema sort of swept the style of filmmaking that I was doing and the style of films and projects that I was working on. I think it's made everybody significantly braver. I think the difficulty for film school students right now is that it's very easy to create an image in the world of digital cinema. You can essentially create an exposure almost effortlessly, but what is harder is to craft an aesthetic that stands your work apart from other people's. What does Fabian? Why don't you start as the round table?
I agree with all of that. I also though think that it's kind of taken away, and I love shooting digital, but it's taken away from that sort of before 2012, which was really that year when it was sort of turning. Before that, it was just you and the director really who could make a creative choice, because everybody else was looking at some crappy monitor with a crappy image. You couldn't really tell what was going on. And in a sense, it's great now to see everything that's going on, but now you have 25 people looking at a monitor, and you can have, I've had countless occasions where, my creative intention, and there was an incident a few years ago with a very dark episode. We're leaving that out of the question right now, but there's other things that have been slightly dark, and I've got producers or other departments even come to me going, isn't that a little bit dark? Do you want to put a bit more light into that corner? And I'm like, that's not, and so that whole world has opened up for, however great it is, it's also opened up for me a can of worms that I find very hard to deal with, to be honest.
Yeah, the D-Cinema has democratized the process a little more, so that when you're crafting an image, it can be open to miscollaboration, perhaps.
I think for me, I think bravery. I think that's the biggest thing for me. I don't think I would have risked this kind of things I would have done shooting on film, and that's the kind of enjoyment I have from it. Yeah, you can kind of see mistakes coming. I think when you shoot digitally, I think you can kind of head them off at the pass. But I don't know. I've been relatively lucky. I think that I haven't. Although there's monitors everywhere. You look around when you're framing up, and no one's really looking at the monitors. To be honest, they're all checking their phones. So I don't actually. I have been quite lucky that I haven't had that many people kind of said to me, "Do you think it's a bit dark, or do you think it's a bit light, whatever?" Because they're still kind of focusing on their own craft. And I think maybe I've been lucky. I don't know, but certainly the shows I have had control, and it has been very much myself and the director and the designer, kind of coming up with images. So for me, I've loved it. Don't get me wrong. I loved. Sadly, not loved it. No, I don't shoot film anymore. But I loved it at the time. But for me, I think this whole digital change has been fabulous. I loved it.
Clarky.
I kind of agree with what you were saying, really, is that the fear, I guess, on film is greater, so you maybe more would probably try and experiment or push yourself a bit more digital, because you've got an instant, you can see the results instantly, and maybe push yourself a bit further and add a bit more and just kind of see what you're doing. But I do think maybe with the digital revolution, it is like harder to stand out as well, because there's just so much now, isn't there? There's so much output, and it's really hard to try and stand out, and maybe a bit scary to fail because everyone sees everything, Instagram, social media. Before, if you made a mistake, maybe it wouldn't get seen, or you could kind of hide it. Now You know, like everyone sees everything all the time, like even this speech right now.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone's watching all the time, but it's okay. We'll be cast aside because there'll be another seminar coming along just in a moment. So, Adam, you've probably photographed on the greatest number of formats in variation than the rest of us because of the nature of the film school in the last couple of years. How have you found embracing the analog technology versus the digital technology?
I actually find digital a bit scarier now because I think it's harder to like craft the right look from it. So I spend a lot more time trying to come up with LUTs and trying to degrade the image or do something to it that doesn't feel too digital. So yeah, I don't know. Film is definitely an easier starting point, and it's great there are so many directors that are really like pushing that. So for music videos, actually, I'd say 1 in 4 is like shot on 16mm at the moment. So that's kind of my education because I wasn't able to shoot film for the first part of my career. I only started learning at film school. So I've kind of gone in reverse. So now I'm shooting way more film than I ever had.
You know what's really funny, just to add to that, is I was in Portugal last week for a commercial, and we shot the main commercial on digital. But then we were asked whether we could do some social media stuff, because that's all the stuff that you have to do these days. And I've never actually shot that before, because nobody has a social media sort of unit. But the director and I decided we should do it, and it was great because I shot it on the iPhone 13, right? And obviously there was no way of them seeing what we were doing, and it was almost going back to shooting film because it was just me and the director under a blanket, shooting with the iPhone. None of the clients, none of the agency could see it, and it was great because we did what we wanted to do, and then they had to take the iPhone, they had to download it, find a way of watching it back, and I really enjoyed that, which is so strange because I hate the iPhone, but it was great because of that process.
Yeah, the intensity of the collaboration. Yeah. I think that's one of the things there's a tendency in digital cinema to have multiple tents and for directors and DPs to get separated and multiple operators working, and you find that the collaboration is less intense. It's nice to be back under the blanket.
I think it's a personal, it's how confident people are. But I used to work with a director, and we shot everything on 16mm or 35 back in the day, and it was amazing to me because he was quite a bit older, very experienced, and he really trusted me on the image. Like, he would hardly ever look at the monitor, and that's something that I only knew about from reading old ASC magazines, where Laszlo Kovacs talks about that, because we're so used to having everybody look at the monitor and the director going, oh, just pan a touch more to the right, or touch more no, left now, right now. And so, and it just made me think of it, kind of reminisce about that time. And I love that because I love that trust. I have a lot of trust in people, and to receive that trust, I think, is really nice. So.
Yeah. Sometimes it's good you even have an earpiece in and a microphone, and the director can talk straight into your ear and describe how well he thinks everything's going. And as an operator, sometimes DPs do that too. And I guess to address the first half of the question, it'd be good to just outline, particularly from the film school side of things, what the application process meant to everybody, and how it felt to be whittled down and accepted, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I think I didn't get in because I find these kind of things quite tricky. I find them difficult. I like to think I'm a reasonably good cinematographer, but presenting myself in front of people, be it another director or be it the Brian Tofano who very kindly let me in, I found quite difficult. So I think to kind of answer your question, it's maybe they didn't look at the time, maybe I didn't present myself in a particularly good way. I think as cinematographers, I think we are, chatting earlier, I think we are all quite, at least I am, quite shy people, and we just don't like putting ourselves out there, at least I don't anyway. So I think maybe they picked up on that, I don't know, but you're right. I think there's a lot of fantastic cinematographers out there who don't get that opportunity. We just kind of have to open ourselves up to these kind of situations and try and do our best.
But also maybe they became fantastic because they got turned down.
Yes.
I was going to say the same, like maybe the fact that they got turned down and kept trying meant that they actually really wanted it, and that's why they were good, because they really wanted it.
Yeah, it just makes you hungrier for it. And I think half of my class had applied once before at least. So I think they need to know that you're committed to doing this for a career, because they have to take a big chance on you. If there's only 8 to 10 people per course, then you're essentially taking it from someone else. So if you're not in it, then someone else should get it.
Also, I think that perhaps certainly from my perspective, the film school route, most film schools try to catch students between the age of 22 to 27, really, in that period of their lives. And at 22, I was scanning barcodes and reading AC magazine, and at 25, I was taking Panellists apart, and I was still doing that at 28, 29 when I was trying to, make the next step. And I, looking back, I think if I had been offered the opportunity to shoot my first, so I shot my first feature when I was 29, and if I would have been offered that opportunity at 24, I would have made a grave mistakes and possibly not recovered because I wasn't capable. And so I think part of the film school responsibility is to spot those candidates that are going to respond to 2 years of intensity, and then part of the responsibility of organisations like ourselves is to enable people like a young version of myself, people like a young version of Clarkey, to evolve until they hit 30 and they can become a cinematographer. And I think, cinematographers themselves have a responsibility to learning, and film schools have a responsibility to learning. But I think if we can encourage people to be self-curious and to be self-taught, I think the same lessons that Brian Tofano can teach you, and Oliver Stapleton and Stuart Harris can teach you at a film school, you can teach yourself, because everything is out there. You just have to find your way through the maze, basically.
I think that's right. I mean, I think it is the film school is basically 2 years, and that's a very short amount of time of your career. I think the film school gives you the fundamentals. It doesn't give you anything else. I've learned far more in the past 18 years of being a working cinematographer than I did in the film school. Of course I did, because it's longer. So I don't think you should kind of go to film school and then expect to become head of department as soon as you leave. I don't think that happens. Maybe it does. I don't know, but certainly not in my experience. But I think it's a good basis. It's a good fundamentals, and I think that's what is useful with the film schools.
I think for me, not doing the film school route and having spent a long time, like 15 years on a set, I think shooting my first film probably wasn't as scary as it would have been, because I feel at home on a film set. I kind of know what everyone's job is. I know how to talk to people. I know how to ask for things. If I'm asking for something, I know how long it's going to take. So I'm not asking for things that are like, can you do that in 5 minutes when it's actually going to be half an hour, 45? I kind of have an awareness of everything. So I felt like, although I was terrified, I was kind of comfortable, because I just felt like this is a place I understand. I know how this works. I've maybe never stood in this seat before, but I know what everyone does, and I know how to I just feel safe on a film set. It feels like home. So I guess that maybe made things a bit easier for me for transitioning, and maybe just being able to push myself a bit quicker with my work, maybe.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think if you feel safe creatively within a space, then it really can be a place for creativity and a place for exploration, as well as being, you've got 12 shots to shoot before lunchtime. It's sort of, that responsibility is on everybody's shoulders. So if you're feeling safe and able to push yourself in an exciting way, that's going to make better work.
And I ended up hiring a lot of friends, obviously, because I know people, so pulled in a lot of favours, and a lot of people who'd be my assistants, asked them to help me. So I guess I knew I had a whole kind of network of support around me. It wasn't me just being like, I've never worked with a focus puller before, I've never worked with a second EC, I've never worked with a gaffer. I knew all those people, so I guess I had that relationships already established, which and I could lean on people for advice because I had this like wealth of contacts and of just people that I knew, so a network of kind of support. So I could phone up like gaffers and ask for advice about scenes, or if I was doing a tracking vehicle, I could phone up a few grips that I know and try and figure out the best way to do it. So I think for me that was like my film school in a way. It's just the whole, all the people that I could lean on and call, that I still call.
Yeah. It took me about 5 years of short films before I could persuade a gaffer to show up. It was mostly just, me and some stands and inappropriate lighting techniques. Can I put it out to the audience again? Does anyone else have a question? Here we go. Shall we go to the centre?
Thank you. Hi, guys. My name's Elliot. Thanks for doing this. It's been really interesting for me. I just wanted to kind of ask a question. A lot of you have spoken about shorts that you made when you first started your career and how you weren't happy with how they came out. And obviously that's going to be a thing in hindsight because you progress and get better. But I just wanted to know, when you look back on those films or when you see short films from young creatives now, what are some of the main things that kind of stick out for you that you're like, that's not right, like from a cinematographer's point of view?
I don't think there's anything that's not right. I mean, I watch a lot of short films from student cinematographers and just young filmmakers in general, and I guess the only thing that ever strikes an audience member as not right is when something isn't cohesively atmospheric with the performance. So quite often there's a difference in agenda between the collaborators, and so a director might have one agenda, a DP might have another, and weirdly that's fairly obvious when you're watching the film. The mistakes that we referred to earlier generally are just, the benefit of hindsight is a great thing, and you tear yourself up about them, 2 years later. But 10 years later, I am, joking aside, I'm furiously proud of my Punch and Judy, zombie flick, because it was just a stepping stone in a journey to being a better artist.
Is your question kind of like, what mistakes shall I look out for so I don't make them? Is that the angle kind of thing? I guess instead of a mistake, I would just say, if I see a short, the thing that would stand out to me that I would really like is when I can see people are being brave or that they've tried something. So I would say, rather than worrying about like what you're going to do wrong, I would just try and do something different, or try and do something true to you or something that you care about, because that's what comes through, I think, and that's what makes a short stand out. So rather than worrying about messing it up, just think about how much you can push yourself to like be brave.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, what you said about being able to connect with the script, I think that's the most important. If you're able to put yourself in some form or other on screen, then it will naturally come through and you will come up with a good piece. I think if you can't connect to it, either it's the writing or the director, then I think you're going on a bit of a hiding for nothing, really. So I think trying to find a project which you can absolutely believe in, and then that creativity will shine through. Just if you can, I know it's very difficult when you first start off, but just try and pick and choose your jobs. Try and find something which really means something to you. I think that's what's important.
I think you can also always forgive the technical issues with a short, and it's always more important what the story is. So I'd always kind of go for that, and I think it's very easy to just be just be looking at the kind of technical aspects and whether you're exposed correctly or what camera you're using, what lenses. But it doesn't really matter that much, to be honest. I think you just have to go with what's in front of you, and as you said, be brave with it, and then you'll learn the rest the more experience you get.
It's interesting what Stuart just said, because I'm still looking for a short that I really want to make, because I haven't made a single short that I actually really wanted to make. I think I've had a slightly different attitude, and like we all know, there isn't any right or wrong in this, because everything is right and everything is wrong. It's all just your personal perception of what is right or wrong. to me, it was always about, I shot everything. Like, you could come to me with the worst script in the world, I would go, yes, I'll shoot it. Because I looked at it, and sometimes later on I thought, maybe I've said yes a few too many times. But I now know I haven't, because to me personally, it benefited me. Because like I said earlier, I just learned so much from these really bad shorts that I made. And aside from that, I had a fucking great time. I just enjoyed myself. I had a great time, and I think if you just stick to yourself and say, have a great time, do what you think is right, stick to that, you will always get something out of it, whether it's a really good looking short or whether it's just a personal experience of meeting people. There is always positive things that come from even the worst little short film that you can think of.
That's great. Next question. There's another one in the centre here, please.
Hi. I think my question is just, as like an aspiring DP or trainee or anything in camera and lighting specifically, when you guys are employing people or looking for new talent or trainees, like, what would you say gets people noticed?
That's a good question.
It's hard, isn't it? Because there's so many people, and there's a lot of jobs now, right? I guess I would look for someone who I want to be around for that long amount of time, because I spend more time at work than I do with my family, So personality, someone who wants to work hard, someone who's maybe passionate, but it's more about, I think it's about personality and chemistry and, someone who's I'm keen. You don't want someone turning up to work who's miserable every day. I'm the only one allowed to be miserable.
Yeah, that's very true. And I guess, from my perspective, it's someone that is super keen to learn every aspect of the filmmaking process. And by that, I mean who drinks what tea and why did you use that particular light and lens combination. And both of those things are absolutely as important to be curious about as each other, because it's what drives the set. Fabian, what do you look out for in your trainee?
Well, I think it's a super difficult question. It kind of relates to what you were asking earlier, because you can't judge. It's so hard to judge people by just by a CV or by a letter, right? I've been doing it for a long time, where I've been taking people on to sets as trainees, and I've had amazing experiences and I've had very bad experiences, because I've chosen people who turned out to be not that interested in. They just use it as a sort of, because they can put it onto Twitter, that they were spend a week on Game of Thrones. And that's super disappointing when you kind of realize that, because I know that there's so many people out there who really want this. But I've been doing this for like a long time, like 10 years or more now, where I've actively taken people onto jobs. And last year I started my sort of own trainee program, and I had, for House of Dragon, we had 350 applications, and I had to choose 10 people out of those for this traineeship. And it was probably one of the hardest things I've done. And I think I've done okay. I think we had some very good people coming through. And so really now, you're looking for personalities. You're looking for a person that where you can genuinely tell that they really love this. They really love filmmaking, cinematography, and they would do anything to do that, because that's what I used to do. I worked 24 hours a day and more if I could have done to get somewhere. I never knew where I wanted to get, but somewhere. And so I think that's what I look for.
Yeah. The route to cinematography is often like running very quickly through a maze. And at some point you pop out in the centre, but only after you've turned around a lot.
With people throwing things at you.
Yeah. It's a maze that's on fire, and you're running, and people are throwing things at you. It's a lot of fun. Another question? Oh yeah.
Thank you. My name's Chris Scarrett. I'm a filmmaker, but more so an ambassador for the Mayor of London's Film and TV Hub. And we are encouraging people to get into the creative industry, specifically film and television. So it's been brilliant to hear everyone's opinions about, to film school or not. And Fabian, really interesting that you set up a trainee program on your last shoot. So that's amazing. But in terms of people who are coming to the industry afresh, whether they've gone to film school or not, do you think there's a skills gap, whether a soft skill or a teachable skill, which someone who has schooled or who hasn't, when they arrive on one of your productions, would benefit from in getting their foot on the first rung of the ladder and helping them progress further? Thank you.
Yeah, I guess so one of the things that we're working on as an organisation is exactly that skills gap and knowledge base. I mean, it's very easy to spot cinematographers, but it's less easy to spot grips and gaffers. And so one of the things that we want to work on as an organisation is to spread the knowledge base so that a greater number of young people can find their way into the industry via the routes that are less publicised, basically. So if we can introduce a collective of people to the industry via cinematography and all of its facets, I think that's an essential thing moving forwards for the future.
I think what was actually quite useful for my year is that they just launched their camera assistant course at the same time, or the year before. So we kind of came out when we graduated with like 10 to 15 ACs that were just ready to help us. So I think that's progressing at the moment and still continuing. So.
I think, like with me, I didn't know anything when I started, so everything I've learned at work, and most departments do have a trainee in their department, but I think more and more trainees now, camera trainees, are expected to have already so much knowledge, video and stuff like that, so you almost need to create a new role for like a mentee or a kind of very much beginner role that is paid to allow people access, because I think a lot of people who can't support themselves or who don't have like a family that can support them, who need to work, can't just come and do an internship for free. They need to work, and I think that's something that we need to address. On the last couple of years, I've tried to have a trainee as well as a mentee, and tried to bring someone in from the industry who hasn't had any access, or from a working class background, or just someone who doesn't have that opportunity, who didn't even know that existed. And try and give them a chance to literally come in completely green with no skills, no expectations. You don't have to set up monitors, run video, run batteries, know how the DP likes their coffee. All you just can, and I've kind of said to the mentees, you can do a week in lighting, a week in grips, a week with me, choose whatever you want to do. So I think I've tried to do that, because I think that's quite important, to just give someone a chance to figure it out without that pressure of knowing anything, because there's not really that opportunity at the minute, I don't think, in the industry. It's getting especially with schedules, and you have to work so fast, everyone seems to have to the trainees even have to know so much.
Yeah. Trainees, when I first started, didn't just have to know how to read a call sheet,
how to get to work.
Yeah, and that was it. And now they're required to have a great knowledge of colour theory and how to run a network of BSC cables without inducing a voltage cycle, all that sort of nonsense. So yeah, I think there's a lot of work needs to be done to create a renewed position within the camera department that is a first stop. One of the things that we're working with the London Screen Academy for is trying to launch an apprenticeship scheme that allows films that are limited companies to hire apprentices in each department, cinematography being just one of those facets. But I think it's essential moving forwards that the route that Rachel and I took to becoming cinematographers is more visible, more obvious, and with fewer barriers. The socio-economic barrier that exists to being a camera trainee on free, for free on a short film needs to be eradicated so that we are, an economically diverse workforce.
I mean, I think you need the support of the production company with that as well. I mean, I think we were very lucky on the job I just finished. We had a company who were able to put 10 people into each department for a couple of weeks, and they didn't know much, but I would assume they learnt an awful lot, and I'm amazed by you guys being able to do that off your own backs. But I think we just need the permission from the production companies to go, okay, we will give them travel, we'll give them some sort of money to be able to turn up on set. I think I've experienced a couple of times where production have said we don't have time, we don't have money to facilitate that. So I think we do need a bit of help as well to do that.
Yeah.
Just to your question, I think when it comes to what skill set is missing, I think it's actually not the young people who are missing that skill set. I think it's actually the other side that's missing a skill set. And to me personally, that's honesty, which is, in my mind, that means that, we're always trying to dance around sort of difficult subjects and you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. I remember the story, there was a guy many, many years ago, probably 12, 14 years ago, who was a camera trainee in my department on a job, and he wanted to go through the camera department. And I got on really well with him, but just something about him told me that this guy is just not, he was super young, and I just had this feeling he's not right for the camera department. I actually can't explain why I thought that, but knowing the camera department, I just thought, this guy isn't right for that. But you know what, he would be great, he could be a great grip. And so one day, and obviously I'm not saying that you're always right, but I took him for a beer and we had a chat. And I said to him, I told him my honest opinion. And I said, look, I don't want to hurt your feelings here. I don't want to, crush your career dreams. But I really think personally, from my experience, you would be much better suited in this other role. And I've recently seen him on a massive job as a grip. And he came up to me and he goes, you know what, that was really hard what you told me back then, but you were really right. And I love being a grip, and I've had a great career. And I think that's what's missing, is that we always try not to hurt each other's feelings, but actually honesty and trying to give someone good advice, not pushing someone into the wrong direction, but giving that advice, which can be hurtful sometimes, can also be very, very beneficial. And that's our responsibility.
Mm. Yeah, and also I think we need to celebrate those crafts independently. There is nothing wrong with not being a cinematographer. Mm. There's plenty right with being a great focus puller, with being an amazing camera operator, with being an incredibly knowledgeable gaffer, electrician, and grip. And I think we need to celebrate those roles as very significant careers that you can excel in and earn a great living and have a great career, work on great projects, have a great influence over the industry, and encourage younger people into the industry in a way that cinematographers don't necessarily are able to do that, because we only employ 2 or 3 heads of department, whereas one of our heads of department can employ 20 electricians. So I think we need to spread the celebration. Any other questions? Just here in the front.
So I've got 2 questions. Firstly is, in terms of in film school, would you endorse or recommend specifically cinematography, or maybe not, to work on set as a trainee, second focus puller or op? And then the second one is, second point is working up the ranks in camera department or whatever department. For me, I suffer from imposter syndrome. Like Rachel, I didn't go through film school. I got on set and worked my way up. When do you know, or how do you know, a good time to step up to your role, and do you suffer from imposter syndrome on any productions, etc.?
To address the second question first, again, so I suffer from imposter syndrome on a daily basis. You have to make a million decisions. Directors make a million decisions, and I find it easier to treat myself as if I'm playing somebody else. So Christopher Ross BSC is just a mask that we put on to deliver our work, and then Chris Ross, the dad and husband, goes home at the end of the day and has a seat on the sofa. But so I think what's important is to start small, and with a crew of 2 or 3 people, and you can make a short film. And then once you feel accustomed to that environment, there's then a crew of 5, crew of 10, crew of 20, crew of 200, and even even on the very biggest of productions, you find that the crew of 300 that surrounds you, you're actually only talking to about 20 of them. So you find that from the very biggest film to the very smallest film, an interaction of 20 people is probably what you're going to be coming up with on a daily basis. I don't know, what does everyone else feel?
I mean, imposter syndrome, yes. I think we all do, don't we? Every single DP that I know, I think, does, or wants to admit it. I mean, yeah, everyone does, I think. In terms of when the right time is, the first things I did was almost like forced to do it by people around me, because I probably was too scared. So I feel like there's never a right time, and even the first time I shot a shot, or the first time I focus pulled, or the first time I operated, they were all terrifying, every single one of them. So if I'd done it a year earlier, it probably would have still been terrifying, and I probably would have survived just the same. So if you can, just try and do it like before you think you're ready, because if you're waiting to be ready, you'll never be ready, My first feature that I focus pulled, I didn't have a choice. The DP just told the production I was the focus puller. And they called me, I thought they were calling me to hire me as a clapper loader, and then they asked me who my clapper loader was going to be. And I kind of went, I'll call you back. I'll think about it. And then just said yes and did it. But I would not have probably done that to myself. I was forced to, but that changed like everything for me. So yeah, maybe you just get some friends that push you a little bit too.
Imposter syndrome, the same answer. I don't believe I should belong here, to be honest. It's all very uncomfortable. But I think when's a good time? I think only you know, really. But perhaps what I would say is that now is probably a good time. Just do it. Just whatever you can, whether it's like the most, the smallest short, or or whatever. Just do what you can. Because if you don't do it now, you'll never do it. So I think just swallow the pride, swallow that fear, and just do it.
That's great. And in answer to your first question, I think film schools do look for experience on set I think almost every bit of being a cinematographer is the interaction with other human beings. And on a film set, that's what you're doing on a permanent basis, like for 12 hours, 14, 17 hours a day, depending on how you're being exploited.
What I found useful.
And so it's important to generate those conversations and to work on how you can, achieve a goal, get a light through a window in a difficult rigging position with persuasive conversation to a gaffer that doesn't want to do that. And that skill is one that you can only pick up really on a film set. So when you've been a trainee, when you've been a clapper loader, you understand when to speak, when to not speak, when to be proactive, when to wait for the opportunity to arise, and then transitioning into film school, I think you're then armed with the ability to have those collaborative conversations.
Yeah. I did find it useful before I went to film school to have some experience, because instead of starting from scratch when I arrived, I already had the kind of technical knowledge, so it was more about kind of working with the right directors and on the right scripts rather than learning what a certain light does. So it was kind of fast-tracked to not having to spend the first 6 months just working out what everything was.
Yeah. Next question somewhere? Or there's another one down the front. Behind the scenes, someone's really messing with us and they keep resetting our timer. So I keep looking down to my right and it keeps going back to 10 minutes, 30 seconds. I have to wrap it up now. Oh, we don't have 10 minutes, 54 seconds. We have an interesting time delay on the clock. Wrapping things up, I guess we'll be around the show. I'm sure you can collar us for a bit of conversation and a bit of advice. It gives me great honour and a massive thank you to Fabian Wagner, ASC, BSC, to Stuart Biddlecombe, to Rachel Clark and to Adam Singodia. Thank you very much for listening in.